worse, right?
Oops. There you go.
So this is a long link, but you can find it if you go to book.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
That works. Let's see. I have pockets. So I don't want you to try to type this link. You can try, but it's simply book.odyssey.org, I believe, is the simplest way. Sometimes the redirect is funny. You have to refresh and it works. But this is a living, breathing thing. Well, it's not human, but it kind of is. There are many people behind this. And this is an effort we are starting, and it's going to come to a head this year. And the point of the Book of Odyssey is to help you on your journey. How many of you are a little overwhelmed by the amount of information Patrick just covered and all the things he said he could get done in like this much time? Anyone? It's totally cool to be overwhelmed. Totally cool. I remember the first time I went to an Odyssey symposium. I watched Patrick do a demonstration of the Atlas tool that we're using, and I literally walked away with both a life mission and I was scared to death that all this stuff was out there. I was like, what am I gonna do that is a value add, because this tool is amazing, it's gonna take my job. Turns out the robots are not taking our jobs yet. We have to help it. We have to bring our knowledge and our questions. And the hardest part is sometimes the right question. So that's why we're in this morning. And I don't know if you introduced me in Chinese yesterday. So you guys know I work with MUI. My focus is in the Americas, helping do the data. I work a lot with data, with sites who have data and they want to bring it into the Odyssey network. I also work a lot on the science. So when we ask a question and we get to results, how do we get to papers? How do we get to posters? How do we show this cool thing? And naturally, the first question everyone asks is, where do I begin? How do I get started, right? So we know asking a question means you have to figure out which of the three buckets it falls into. And we hear this funny expression, and I'm not sure if this expression translates as well as we like it, but join the journey. Are you guys familiar with Odysseus and the story of Odysseus? Did you ever have to read that in school? See, big assumption. Odysseus, famous story of an explorer that has a very, very indirect journey to get to where they're going. It's like 20 years of many things, and it's a classic. In ancient studies, it's this whole giant, I think it's technically a poem, although it's a very, very long poem. It does not fulfill the haiku requirements. And it's the story of being circuitous or roundabout. And Odysseus is kind of our mascot in some ways for Odyssey. The name sounds similar, right? But the journey is the challenge. How do we take ourselves through? We have an interest and turn it into action. So the chapter we're looking at, the book itself has many chapters on all the ways you can take different things that Odyssey has done very, very well. And as you saw earlier, Patrick presented the mission and the values. There's even a giant, there will be a section for the collaborators. There's stuff on what is open science, because open science is kind of contradictory to everything you learned in school in some ways. This idea that my question is mine and I can't share it because that's my PhD. We are all about sharing in Odyssey. We share code. We share every bit of the process to help you recreate it and do it in a reproducible way. And that's not to say you can't have things that are yours, but you might hear an acronym called FAIR. FAIR means findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. It's just a standard that has come out around data and data sharing and how that works. So you can read all about that principle. But really what you want to know is, how do I get started? So I put this cute Lao Tzu quote because I hear it all the time and I like it, which is, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So you're here, that's step one. You didn't know it, but you're on the journey already. And as a community, you will find lots of resources depending on your style of what you want to do. So maybe you like to listen. Maybe you're into the didactic, the talking. We have community calls. They are very, very late for China. But I heard a rumor that Ling Yi is your secretary for OHDSI China, and there may be other local time zone activities he can help you get connected to if you hear something.
Our monthly meeting is Saturday.
There you go. So if you want to attend, I guess one of these two can help you get onto that. Him. Raise your hand, or they know who you are. But
We have a monthly call every May. 是什么？
第二个周六的中午11点北京时间是我们OHDSI中国的月会，每个月的例会，正好是这周六中午11点，还没过，就是。
do you record them too? Nice. That's what we try to do as a community. So if you don't want to stay up to midnight, but you're a student, so maybe midnight's not as late for you as it is for me, you can watch recordings of all the calls, and all the presentation slides are published too. But the idea is each week in the global community, we try to spotlight ongoing research, active opportunities for collaboration. So maybe somebody has a question and they say, I need help. Maybe it's an OBGYN question and they need an OBGYN expert, or atrial fibrillation. They need somebody to validate the cohort they built on a US data set is representative and written in a nice way that it can actually go across a global network. Very regularly, we find we all have bias. We write things in the way we expect to see them, and then we run it against other data and we get 0. And it's not because the people don't exist, it's because the disease pathway, as Patrick was saying, those treatment patterns look so different that we need that global collaboration to help us write a cohort definition that is separate from the data itself. It is how it exists in any way it happens, and then we transport that thing around and see that variability. So that's one thing. If you like to hear, you like to be talked to, that's one way to get involved. There are these things called work groups, which are really special topics. So imagine your interest is just characterization studies. You just want to look at that. Maybe you need help starting that. There's a whole group called the Nurturing Committee, which Mui mentioned, which you could submit a question, and there are people who could mentor you for that type of question. Maybe your interest is in prediction modeling. They have 2 call series for prediction modeling. They have an Eastern Hemisphere and a Western Hemisphere. And that group looks at all prediction methodologies, and they are responsible for curating what we call the OHDSI methods library, which is that GitHub place that you can take free code. They run many of the studies that we've been looking at for that method. And it's a great place to listen and hear and then get connected, because there's always opportunity. And then in the estimation, there's a whole estimation work group that, again, their focus is just estimation studies and all of the code that we might publish to run an estimation study. So you can navigate and pick the groups you like. Perhaps you are a clinician and you want to undertake the brave task of helping with your ETL. I know Mui is hosting an ETL session tomorrow, the next day. So perhaps you have an electronic health record locally and you're having trouble, you have questions. Why does the data look like this? How do I map it? There's a whole group of people that's their interest. That's one work group. So the topics are super varied. You'll even see China is technically a work group, although now it's a regional chapter, I guess. But it's whole special interests because, as you might imagine, in Chinese data, there are very specific problems with vocabularies or standard concepts that need to be addressed by a group of people who understand that specific topic. So it's pretty fun. And the good news is you don't have to show up and have to know what you're doing when you first join the call. You can simply go and listen because, hey, maybe you're an epidemiologist and you heard these are other epidemiologists. Maybe you just think NLP is really cool. Maybe you don't know what NLP stands for. That's okay. You can join these and learn and see and figure out which ones fit your interests. And many, many people find the work groups to be a nice place to get their hands onto some active project or to find something that really fits into their skills. Because as Patrick mentioned, we are a mosaic. We have many different types of people and we like to build teams and have that strength. So you can always bring something to the table with these. And the first step is simply finding one that appeals to you, that you like, and then dialing in or listening to the recording and getting engaged. So that's step 2. You could join a work group. But you also have a regional chapter. So spoiler, China is one of the biggest regional chapters. Korea is a very large one as well. And you have a whole website that's just for you. And I anticipate one day when the Book of Odyssey is complete, right now we are drafting, we are not quite done writing it, you may see a Book of Odyssey in Chinese because it's easier to understand and it will be specifically edited to things that are important for the regional chapter. So today, you can go to this website. Perhaps you already have, but if not, it's really easy to find. And that's a resource to you. Sometimes just finding the website is the hardest part. So there you go. Do you guys know what Odyssey calls its members? Have you been paying attention? Pop quiz. What is an Odyssey member? What's the term we use? Anyone remember? Is it I'm an Odyssey member or am I something else? I heard like collaborator. Does anyone else agree? What does anyone know what a collaborator is? Do you have a guess? Anyone want to tell me what they think an Odyssey collaborator is? Any volunteers? You're just hungry? Me too. I'm always hungry. All right, I'm just going to call on someone. You in the white shirt, what is a Odyssey collaborator? Any guess? No? That's okay. It could be events, yeah. And any other thoughts on what an Odyssey collaborator is as a thing? What does it mean? This is not a trick question, actually, I promise you. And I don't know if it's easier to ask the question in your mother tongue, but collaborator, any other thoughts on what is a collaborator? How do you become one?
Link each other, talk to each other. At this age, they use multiple channels across regions.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So collaborator is the word. You're all collaborators today. You're in here, you're learning about Odyssey, you're excited, maybe. And a collaborator is simply somebody who has said, I want to be part of this. And they may show up as a pin on the map because they create a profile and they make themselves very publicly known. Or they can just lurking and, well, you can't troll, not yet, but you can watch and still be a collaborator. It is a very simple term for anybody who wants to be part of the community and contribute their expertise. And I say that because some people think you need to pay a membership fee or, I don't know, register every year or something. It's not Odyssey is open, and there may be times when Ling Yi sends a thing around saying, who's active? And maybe you run a census of your who's in what place. Maybe you have changed, you finished your degree and you're somewhere else. He might capture that. But we're very loose and intentionally so that you can collaborate on your terms. And as Patrick could tell you, in industry, there's all sorts of rules about what you can and can't do. I'm sure with patient data, there's always all sorts of roles. So we are very open, and you can be a patient. We're all technically patients, as it turns out. You could be a health professional, a researcher, or just someone who feels compelled to the mission. It's pretty inclusive. So that term you'll hear a lot, and you're all collaborators now, so congratulations. And the other term you'll hear a lot is the OHDSI Research Network. So we've been talking about this. Does anybody know a thing or two about this? Does anyone want to tell me what they think the OHDSI Research Network is? Is this one big database of patients? Like one massive 2 billion patient database? Anyone know? You guys are like, I have no idea what she's asking. Yeah. Yeah. So the response is it could be data scientists, physicians, other data owners. Those are the collaborators in the network. But does anybody know, after listening to this OMOP kind of primer, is OMOP one database or is it many? Many, yeah. And does data move? Does it leave where it lives? No. That's the whole point. It stays where it's supposed to be. It doesn't leave. And I say that because sometimes in OHDSI we get requests. Can I query this OHDSI database? Can I write a study on the OHDSI database? Well, sure. Which one? What cohort or definition are you creating? What types of collaborators do you want to engage? OHDSI is a model that is federated, right? So as you navigate the research network, you'll hear a lot about this, and you'll hear about the extract, transform, load process, because everyone has to take their local data and put it into the data model. And then they might install tools like the Atlas instance that you guys are using. Those are all components that help make it easier to collaborate. But just raising your hand is the first step, saying you're a researcher. If you don't have data, that's okay. You are always welcome, even if you don't have data. And as you're navigating your OHDSI, you're going to find yourself in a lot of times when we say these things and we have OHDSI terms, language, it sounds like a whole foreign language in itself. And even to native English speakers, it's totally foreign, the things we say. So collaborator, we know what that means. We know the research network are the sites who participate. And then we have a framework of how to go through, how to take your question and map it to those 3 boxes. And that's really what the bulk of this chapter will show you. You know, how many patients have this? We were saying that maps to a certain type of question. So the chapter is under some formatting review right now, and it's a little bit ugly, I'll be honest. But the idea is soon with this resource, if you forget all the great things that Patrick said, you can take the time to go back and look at this and use it to help you go through and speak OHDSI. And then you get into this great templatized view of the world. You have a disease of interest, it may be a complication, and a time period at risk. Maybe you have a certain type of question about treatment choice or response. As you map to these types of questions, you will find it easier and easier to take advantage of the already available tools, because you'll know right away, this is this type of question, and I can use this study package or this R code, and I know that this person runs a work group for this type of method, and I can ask them to help me if I need it. So you're never alone in your OHDSI journey, and you have all sorts of ways to play around with this. So I'm going to pause. I know this is a lot of text. You're in school. You probably read books all the time. But what questions do you guys have on where you're beginning? What are things that may not be clear?
You mentioned you had, like you listened to one of Patrick's presentation before. That's kind of how you start. So I think
Yeah. Both. Total happy accident. So, and actually many OHDSI collaborators tell a somewhat similar story despite the fact it looks a little different. Somehow they ended up at an OHDSI symposium, you know, a big meeting that we have. We have them regionally and we have the one in the US. And they saw these people doing this crazy stuff like building cohorts in like minutes and executing it on data. And that was enough. We all went back to wherever we were from. We said, how do I join? We might have joined a community call. We might have raised our hand and participated in a work group. So in my case, I had a boss who said, check out this OHDSI thing. Go to this Washington conference. So I got a plane ticket. I flew there for the morning of. I stayed there all day. I went home that night. And the entire day was presentations, which you can actually see if you go to ohdsi.org. You can see all the past presentations and past events. All these really cool things. And after that, I was like, wow, this is what I always wanted to do when I grew up, but I didn't even know people were doing it. And I actually almost became a doctor, but then I became an epidemiologist because I don't like people directly. I like populations of people. And it's cool if you judge me for that. I am so supportive of having clinicians in our team. I just don't like people individually. I want to know what's happening at a big scale because the individual is one observation. Can I replicate that? Are you the same or is it just one case? But you'll see all these old presentations and some of the things. So this was the year I went. You'll see some pictures. I'll see if these load up. This is when I started. I've joined a long time ago, but not as long ago as those who actually started it. But this will probably take forever to load. There are these great shots of people mid-action. And I have a spoiler for you. Patrick is always this enthusiastic, but he's extra excited today because you took your prescribed treatment and we still have to study the effects. So you have this room full of a ton of people. They're up there presenting. And all these people are academics. They could be practicing clinicians. They could be government officials who have an interest in, you know, maybe they work at a governing group that looks at data. And this is the first year. This room has now grown into like 3 times the size of this. But I think that one Chinese symposium is still bigger than the first US symposium, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of engagement. We have poster sessions. So if you ever want to look at the research, there are all sorts of posters online. I know that Mui is working to make the posters a little easier to get access to. So she's assigning people in our team to make sure at the end of each symposium that we're at that we can help direct people. But there are these great dialogues. And if you do OHDSI research, if you ask a question, you could have a poster. Absolutely. You would submit your abstract like you would, and it's totally possible. And you could, if you're a computer scientist and you like to code, you could design your own demo. You could create your own software and show that as well. Or if you really like to talk, like I like to talk, you could do a lightning talk or a TED talk, you know, like 7 minutes or whatever the amount of time is, and talk about all your great OHDSI accomplishments. And maybe you'll end up here in some of this. This is a software demo here with one of the creators of Atlas. There's Kristin, our boss.
Yeah, our boss, not Patrick's boss.
No, Patrick is his own boss.
Make sure that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Patrick and Christian, who's the boss there?
That's a good point.
Yes, I know you guys do, so
So.
I'm staying out of that.
So I have a question for you. Do you want to join the journey? Yeah? It's okay to say no if you're like, I'm here to get my credits. Well, we'll make sure this link is easily accessible to you. The book has a lot of content. So we had a hackathon for documentation. We called it a docuthon. And we sat and we actually broke into groups and wrote whole chapters of the book or worked through different parts of things that people have trouble with when they join the community. So you will find all sorts of step-by-step guides, and very soon we're going to do some of these things to make it easier, but you'll see all sorts of information, and you'll have the opportunity to go through it at your own pace. And if you really like it and you want to help translate it to Chinese, I'm sure, Lingy is not going to be the end of one. So, but that's where it's growing. I know the Korean Book of Odyssey is under development too. But the idea is to make it easier so you have a reference manual in addition to all these great presentations. And of course, you always have the community forum, which Mui has been talking about. You can always show up here. This is a very accessible place, and you can ask your questions. You don't have to write it in English. You can go to the Odyssey in China section and.
Well, you know what would be more fun and entertaining is for them to actually put Chinese in the U.S. forum and see how many people actually pay attention.
That's true. Patrick's really good at responding to those.
Chris Knoll has replied to Korean posts by sending them through Google Translate.
I would love that if I could get a screenshot one day of all the hot topics are only in Chinese, because we do tell people there's this whole group of people that are really interested, and they're very diverse, but somehow we always end up in English on the forum. I can't tell you why. So that is Joining the Journey. I'm going to pause there for a bit. I think you guys look like you're digesting the journey. You'll get excited, I'm sure of it, because you're going to do a really fun exercise this afternoon. So what do we think for time? We have, yeah.
35.
Yep.
We've got 15 minutes here.
So back to the fun part. Let's see where your slides are.
So just so you guys know, we do have a WeChat group.
Sounds good.
Is already on the WeChat group.
Perfect.
But it's not complete yet. So you'll
You might decide. Yes, I believe. Oh shoot.
How do I make this a screen go up? I just want to get the screen shot. I want to turn it off first.
I'll trade with you, because I'll be the scribe.
Okay.
Although I think I'm loud enough, I don't need a mic.
All right, so we have 15 minutes before we're going to take our break, but now you guys have to spend this 15 minutes working, and we're going to see how well it shows up. It's going to show up okay. So that's okay. So yesterday, Mui asked you for high-level areas that you're interested in, and what I captured in my notes was that there's interest in cervical cancer. There's interest in cardiovascular disease. Raise your hand if that was your topic, cardiovascular disease. Whose topic? Right. Okay. Somebody said they're interested in gastric cancer. Who said they were interested in gastric cancer? Very good. We had interest in breast cancer. Very good. We have interest in cerebrovascular disease. Who was that? Okay. We had interest in atrial fibrillation. We have interest in hepatocellular carcinoma, and they apparently go in packs. And hepatitis B. Who was interested in hepatitis B? It was me. That was you? Yes. Okay. So what I want each of you to do, and you can just grab a piece of paper that you have with you, or you can type it on your screen, is I want you to think about an area that you're interested in. But now I want you to take one extra step, and I want you to ask and write down one question that you are interested in answering for your one area of interest. And given that you shared these, we're going to use these as some examples. But I want you just to be thinking about, for any area of interest, is there a characterization question you're wondering about? Is there an estimation question that you're thinking about? Or is there a prediction question? The reason that we want you to think about these questions is because the building blocks for all of those three things, those three types of questions, are cohorts. defining people who satisfy some criteria. And when we come back after lunch, we're going to teach you how to build cohorts to answer your question. But that'll only be useful if you have a question that we're going to ask. So I want you all to be thinking right now about the disease you're interested in and a question. And while you are thinking about that, and please write that down, let's talk through one together. Cervical cancer. Since it's at the top of the list. That's yours. Do you have a question in mind about cervical cancer you would like to study?
Yes.
Okay, what was that?
I want to know whether the vaccinate be benefit for those who have this cervical cancer. Maybe, but I don't know whether we know it because this vaccinate is just available for recent years, so we don't know the outcomes. So I don't think it's a good question for now to research.
So let's talk it through. So there's vaccines for people who have the HPV virus, right? And so the vaccine is trying to prevent cervical cancer from happening. So in that case, the cervical cancer is the outcome. And are we so a characterization question might be, amongst people who get vaccinated, how many go on to get cervical cancer? So that might be a characterization question. A prediction question might be, if I'm a person who got vaccinated, what's the chance that I'm going to get cervical cancer? And an estimation question might be, for patients who choose to get the vaccine versus choose to not get the vaccine, what is the risk of developing cervical cancer? So those are three examples. So of those, which one sounds like what you're interested in? This is the prediction. So we have amongst a cohort of people. Well, that's okay. We can show all the ideas. It's probably good. So let me go back to it. Amongst people who are vaccinated for their or vaccinated for the HPV virus, which people go on to develop cervical cancer in the next period of time, 10 years, 5 years, whatever it might be. Okay? So the idea there is that there's a cohort of people who took the purple pill, where the purple pill happens to be the vaccine. So we know the moment that they took the purple pill. It's the moment you swallowed the pill. That's the moment they took the vaccine. So we have a cohort of those people. And at that point, some of those people are going to get cervical cancer in the future. And some of those people are not going to get cervical cancer in the future. And we want to try to figure out, can we predict who's who? Does that make sense as a question to everybody? So in that case, we would need to define two cohorts. There's the cohort of people who got the vaccine, and there's the cohort of people who get the cervical cancer. And the research question we'd be asking is, amongst the people in the cohort who got the vaccine, who also becomes a person who's in the cohort of people who have cervical cancer? Does that make sense? So that is a great prediction question, a very well-defined problem. We could use our data to find the people who got the HPV vaccine. We can find the people who go on to have cervical cancer. If we think about the data that's necessary in the common data model, we need to see the vaccine, which Mui told you would be recognized as a drug in the data model. And then we need to see the cervical cancer, which is a diagnosis, which would be in your condition table. So you basically need two tables to find the people you're interested in. And then we can use all of the medical history amongst women before they got their vaccine to predict the cervical cancer in the future. Very good. The cardiovascular disease. Do you have an idea of a question?
Yes. I have questions about high uric acid is associated with the risk of cardiovascular disease.
Hyaluronic acid?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also about the treatment of decrease of the high uric acid is really the protective fact for cardiovascular disease.
So what is, I'm not familiar, hyaluronic acid is for what disease?
For cardiovascular disease, for the risk of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, so what do you use hyaluronic acid for? What does it treat?
Like there's a drug for the cystatin. I don't know the English name. The Chinese name is the cystatin.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a drug that can decrease the level of the uric acid.
Uric acid. So it's a treatment for gout?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So I'm sorry, it's American. So amongst patients who have gout, who have increased uric acid levels, there's a specific treatment, and the concern is that that treatment might cause side effect, which would be increasing the risk of cardiovascular events.
I have two questions.
Okay, two.
First question is that high uric acid is associated with the risk of cardiovascular disease.
I see. So you are wondering whether people who have high uric acid have high cardiovascular risks. Okay.
And the second is that if there is drug intervention, reduce the level of the uric acid, so it can protect and lower the risk of cardiovascular disease, the incidence of cardiovascular
Got it. Okay.
disease.
Okay.
No intervention, another one has a drug intervention.
Got it. Okay, very good. So let me just summarize so everybody can hear it. So, and correct me if I misspeak. So there's two different areas of it, or two different questions. The first one is if we could describe the people who have high uric acid, and amongst people who are observed to have high uric acid, we could observe the outcome of cardiovascular events. And there's an interest in whether people who have high uric acid have a higher rate of cardiovascular events than people without high uric acid, and the rate of cardiovascular events. That itself is not a causal question. We're not asking if uric acid is the cause of the event. We are simply describing that we see a high rate of events. That would be a characterization study. But the estimation study would be that there may be treatments for uric acid. So amongst people who have high uric acid, we may be able to see treatments, alternative treatments. There is one here in China, which would be our purple pill. And we could find another treatment, which is not as effective for uric acid, which would be our white pill. And if we found those two treatments, we could compare the risk of having a cardiovascular event on those two alternative treatments. And that would be able to tell us whether the effect of this one treatment, the purple pill, has a decreased effect on cardiovascular events.
That's really true. Great. And I had a study that was that the lifestyle intervention also prevents the lifestyle intervention of your high uric acid patients. You can really protect them too.
So maybe instead of the white pill being a different drug, the white pill could be an alternative intervention, which is lifestyle modification instead of the drug. Very good.
Both lifestyle and drug.
Got it.
Interventions, only drug interventions, and the drug and lifestyle together, combination, and only lifestyle.
Very good. Okay. So these are very good job. Those are very well specified questions. When we think about the data to answer those questions, we need to think about what pieces of that information we would be able to observe and how would we observe it. So we may see high uric acid not by a measurement of uric acid, but by a diagnosis of uric disorder, which may be something like a gouty diagnosis. That could be one thing that we could observe. We will certainly observe the medical treatment of the drug. Questions of lifestyle modification become challenging to answer in observational data unless the lifestyle modification is actually recorded in the electronic health record. And so it's a very well specified question. One might find that it's challenging to find the data to support it, but it's a very good question. Excellent. Yeah, let's do one more. Hepatocellular carcinoma, since you guys are a pair back there. What question could you imagine you'd be interested in? You're not saved by the bell. Everyone's going to wait until you give me a good question.
I don't get to save by the bell.
Since the immune checkpoint inhibitor is a hot topic nowadays in the oncology field, I'm wondering if this inhibitor, for example, the anti-PD-1 or PD-L1, has the same effect in HCC, hepatocellular carcinoma. Since several clinical drug trials have failed, I was wondering if these inhibitors still have the same effect in HCC.
So excellent. So let me capture it. So there's particular drugs that are available right now that treat other cancers that have shown to be effective. However, it is not clear whether they are effective in hepatocellular carcinoma. So one thing that one could do would be a population level effect estimation study where we find people who have hepatocellular carcinoma and we compare those that receive the treatment that you're interested in versus those that receive some alternative treatment for hepatocellular carcinoma. And then we see the outcome, which would be like time to death or something like that, probably be an outcome of interest. So if that's the case, we'd want to study which drug works most effectively at keeping the patients alive. So that's a very well specified estimation question. All right, we're going to take our break and we're back at what time? 1:30. What I would ask is, actually, we have we don't have a shared, or they're using a WeChat to like chat with each other?
They are, but we're going to probably pull up Google Docs.
I'll pull up a Google Docs?
Well, for us, because what I'm doing is typing.
Okay.
So I'm writing, I'm typing.
Okay, so I'll see you back here at 1:30. I do want you to think about your research questions, and one task you're going to have when you come back is we're going to ask you to put your questions in a Google, not a Google Doc.
你们的问题你放在这个微信文里面 ，OK， 我们会把这些放在一个document 上面 ，OK， so 1:30之前回来之前，你们的问题给我放在这个微信这个 group，OK， 这个 tutorial group 上面，行吗？可以吗？谢谢啊。So they're gonna put on the WeChat and I'll take it.
Perfect. All right, I'll see you guys at 1:30. Thank you.